President Trump's immigration ban not only raising questions but causing havoc and confusion. Now, even if you agree with the policy, it's possible to deny the implementation has been disagreeable. We will take a look at the immigration dysfunction. Then the question, and this is the biggest one facing the country, is will banning refugees make us safer as a nation or actually less safe? Even many Republicans are saying it's the latter. Also, is this really a Muslim ban? The White House says no definitively, but a whole lot of people disagree, and they're taking to the streets to make their voices heard. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. A whole lot of national news here for us tonight. And it was, of course, the story of the weekend and the biggest mess to come from the Trump White House so far, and in 8 busy days, that's saying something. Now, Friday's immigration ban, signed by President Trump, leading to chaos and protests at airports across the country. That in part because even the people whose job it is to enforce immigration laws had no idea what was happening or what the new president wanted. Now, we will focus much of the show tonight on the immigration ban, but we begin with how it all came together. And to put it bluntly, according to many Republicans even, the answer would be badly. First up, senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman with the TikTok. Andrew?
And Rich, let's begin that TikTok in late 2015. The genesis of Friday's orders direct from the mouth of then candidate Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Then last year, after becoming the Republican nominee, Trump softened his position, settling in on the policy that was implemented on Friday.
In addition to screening out all members of the sympathizers of terrorist groups, we must also screen out any who have hostile attitudes toward our country or its principles.
After the election, a small group of Trump team members began working on the executive order, which Trump signed on Friday. The language of the order was overseen by Steve Bannon, the Trump campaign CEO and former top man at the far-right website Breitbart. Bannon has no immigration, foreign policy, or homeland security background. He is the president's chief strategist, and he has talked openly in the past of the war on terror as a recruiting a Christian militia to preserve American interests. Working under Bannon was 32-year-old Trump policy chief Stephen Miller, who wrote the bulk of the executive order. Miller, who graduated from Duke in 2007, worked in congressional offices as a press secretary and communications officer. Also no foreign policy, immigration, or homeland security experience. Now, according to multiple reports, Miller and Bannon did not reach out to the departments, agencies, or officials that you would expect to be consulted on an executive order of such sweeping magnitude. Reporting is also focused on a few. Defense Secretary James Mattis only saw the order hours before it was signed and was not allowed to provide input on it or its language. Mattis criticized Trump's proposed Muslim ban last summer, which may explain why he was excluded. Also out of the loop, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, who not only did not see the order until after it was released, he was mid-flight on a conference call that was explaining the order to him when he saw the signing of it on television. His incredulous reaction? The president is signing the executive order that we are discussing. The result? Homeland Security applied to ban the refugees, green card holders, and everyone coming from the 7 nations listed in that order. The mix-up proven by how it was solved. Overnight Saturday, Bannon and Miller led the White House to declare that the green card holders could be allowed to enter the U.S., but only on a case-by-case basis. Multiple reports also say the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, the people who check the legality and impact of executive orders like this one, were kept out of the loop, though the White House now says the OLC did in fact review the order. But other key agencies and entities were clearly kept out of the loop. Customs and Border Protection caught off guard, first telling airlines to boot any passengers under passport from any of the 7 countries in the ban, including green card holders. They were finally notified at 3 a.m. on Saturday, but were not instructed about the waiver process that the White House now says allows green card holders to come into the U.S. And another key agency, the Citizenship and Immigration Service, were later ordered to stop work on any applications from banned countries, that the interview process could continue, but work on citizenship, green cards, and more must be stopped cold. In short, Rich, a lot of confusion. Nobody seemed to know how this was supposed to be implemented or what the president wanted until after he signed the executive order.
And We've got 16 attorney generals across this country who have fought to fight this. You've got 4 federal judges here who in different parts of the country have said, questioning the legality, if you will, put a stay on this. This could be going all the way to the Supreme Court. And tonight, you have Senator Schumer and other Democrats that are planning a march from the Capitol to both the Supreme Court, and there's efforts to get votes on the floor here, whether they're symbolic or real, to repeal this. Of course, there's a lot of parliamentary procedure as to whether or not McConnell will allow the vote and whatever else. But nonetheless, there's confusion, there's anger, and there's also a question about competency. Right now in Washington, you're going to do something this big in the way you described it. Who's in the loop? Who's not in the loop? Who do you check with? Who do you consult? We didn't even mention legislators on the Hill.
Yeah, well, this is an executive action, so legislators didn't necessarily need to be in the loop.
You'd think they'd be consulted.
But you would think that they would be. Look, when you deal with executive orders like this, when you're changing a policy of how you want the federal government to handle a particular law, like the immigration law, you let all the key players know beforehand, so that when the moment it's signed into power with the executive order, everybody's on the same page, and at least there's no confusion on how it's going to be implemented. You can have the debate about whether it's good or bad another time, but everybody knows what's happening. Instead, you had mass confusion. People stopped at airports. People sent back to their homes. People had their green cards taken from them in some cases. And it seemed like nobody had any idea what was going on. Oh, and you had tens of thousands of people at American airports all weekend.
Let's bring in the balance of our panel now. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist, former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association, and Andrew Whitman, who you already met. And Richard, I start with you because in addition to being obviously the title that I mentioned here and the former role that you had within the Republican Party nationally, you're also an attorney. You've handled civil rights cases, so you understand that, and also you've worn the uniform of the U.S. military here, so you also know that. This had a bad look this weekend, and I listened to the press conference today with none other than Sean Spicer telling that everyone's overreacting, everyone's making this a bigger deal than it is, people got to calm down, this is a great success this weekend. Part of it is doing his job, but part of it's also a bit of a misread. A lot of Republicans, some on the record and a lot off the record, were like, what are we doing here? And the idea, and we'll talk more about Bannon being in the loop and certain others not being in the loop, who's making the calls? I know it's day 8, but this was a self-inflicted wound by the president's administration. And as I said, before you talk as a Republican, talk as somebody who's concerned about the national security as a military guy and also about the law as somebody who's handled civil rights cases where people are asking questions as to who does the law apply to and who doesn't.
Yeah, so again, this is an executive order, and President Trump is an executive. And so I think that's why you see a limited amount of people involved in the decision-making process, because you're so used as an executive to making decisions and then having those immediately executed. The problem I think here is that, which we all know, the 800-pound gorillas in the room, is that the implementation of this particular order was not done, the execution was not done very well and caused widespread confusion. The legalities of it, in terms of it being a justful and lawful executive order, I think you will find that the president, since he is the head of the executive agency and executes the law, can put a temporary ban on it. If I think it's anything longer than that, I think it would certainly have to go to Congress, because Congress really passes the laws.
And we will get into the legality a little bit later in the program, because people are asking, A, if it's legal, and also if it goes to the high court, some of the issues that it raises. But Dominic, listen, a lot of administrations have difficult times, especially when you have an outsider administration, never more than we've seen now, but even those that have come from non-traditional routes. Remember Jimmy Carter, when he came in and he was a governor of Georgia here and he really didn't know Washington. There was certainly time to get your sea legs, and you could argue he never found them as president. But nonetheless, this isn't a president reacting to world events that he and his team are trying to catch up to, or a natural disaster or something else as to how to manage, or an economic collapse that just falls into your lap. These are self-inflicted, as I said. He chose to do these. He chose who to exclude, and he also chose that his answer after all the questions are raised to say, everything's great, the media is the enemy, people are making a big deal about nothing, the crowds don't know what they're talking about, And you have a very adversarial press secretary coming out today, basically doubling down on what Kellyanne Conway said on the Sunday shows. I think we're getting an idea of what we're going to get for the next 4 years. And I think people make a mistake if they think this is just, early feeling out process. I think this is what it's going to be.
I think we saw clear signs of that, Richard, before he even took office.
But a lot of people say, oh, you have a candidate. Once you're in the Oval Office, everything changes with the president.
I think that was wishful thinking on all of us, on all of our parts, that frankly the administration would be mature and handle things in a very responsible way based on American history of presidents in past. I really believe with this president in particular that he feels he slayed the dragon, meaning Hillary Clinton, so he thinks he has an entitlement, even though he doesn't. He can do an executive order, but he thinks he has an entitlement to do whatever he wants. President Trump created not a national incident, a global incident that the world is reacting to. It was the implementation. It was dumb, arrogant, stupid, puts American lives at danger. What's going to happen now? Do you think this is a literal recruiting tool for terrorists around the country? It points to American arrogance that, we don't really talk about this as much in the country, but outside the country, it's a big issue. People in some communities, in some countries, feel that America is arrogant. And this president is playing exactly to it. It was disgusting what happened. And President Obama spoke out about it, and he's right to speak out about it.
Just on the implementation of this, forgetting of the policy, forgetting whether you agree with it or disagree with the implementation. Remember when healthcare.gov launched? My goodness, the website doesn't load. It was a national crisis. Everybody was looking at how. This seems a bit worse and a bit less thought through than a website not loading. So for anybody who's it's not just the policy, it's the way it was set up.
And Richard, he can dismiss, Chuck Schumer. In fact, if we can, Chuck Schumer, listen, he can be, and for all of us that know that have covered him, okay, he's not always the warmest and fuzziest guy here, but he certainly isn't somebody that's a sad sack or somebody prone to shedding a few tears here. He was really moved and really upset by what went down, and apparently families separated here with all the confusion on Saturday. Take a listen to him this weekend for yourself.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
Now, he was dealing all weekend with families that didn't know who was coming, who was going, who wouldn't be allowed back in the country, families that were separated. Now, that again Sunday. Now, flash forward to what Donald Trump had to say this morning.
I noticed Chuck Schumer yesterday with fake tears. I'm going to ask him who is his acting coach, because I know him very well. I don't see him as a crier. If he is, he's a different man. There's about a 5% chance that it was real, but I think they were fake tears.
Really? He's our president? I mean, there's a whole bunch of, forget Democrats now, whole bunch of Republicans, whole bunch of people on the national security side. You saw what the State Department had to do today. He's burning bridges, Richard, that he's going to need at some point to get what he wants. He said Schumer's his guy to get the infrastructure and the rest. I only got a minute here, but my point is, for anybody who thought he was crazy like a fox and had a whole agenda, it's been 8 days, and it feels like 8 months with the amount of fights that he's brought on, and he's starting these fights. He doesn't need to.
I think as time will go on, he'll realize that there's certain things that you should focus on and certain things you shouldn't. We shouldn't focus on the number of people who attended the inauguration for days after the inauguration, asking photos to be shown. That's really not important. It's not why you were elected. Making fun of or talking about how fake Chuck Schumer tears are certainly not important. So I think as we go on, he'll realize not talking about
What's your basis for thinking that he'll learn that, since he hasn't seemed to learn it
well,
so far?
He's 8 days in, so I think he'll realize.
He was elected 3 months ago.
Well, I think he'll realize. You know what? I have to talk about what I was
only
elected
thing
about
is,
and what's
Richard,
important.
my only thing is,
I'm
Richard,
hopeful.
I think, yes, you are hopeful. I am saying he is 71. It's kind of fully formed at this point, but we shall see. All right, coming up
he's
next.
changed a little bit, remember, under Kellyanne.
Oh, yeah. Coming up next, will banning people from those 7 countries make America safer? Use history as a guide. The answer is no. And some big-name Republicans, they're saying it actually, as Dominic says, will increase the terror threat.